Welcome back to another episode of Combating Cancer. My name is Gwen Kelly, and I'm your host. If this is your first time tuning in, I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for being here. Truly, whether you found this podcast intentionally or you found it in a moment you didn't expect, I'm really glad you're listening. I know that sometimes people find this podcast during long nights, during treatment days, during drive homes from appointments, or in moments when things feel especially heavy. And if that's you right now, I just want you to know you're not alone here. For those who don't know me, I was diagnosed with stage 3 astrocytoma brain cancer at the age of 19. And while that sentence has become something I can say more easily now, it still carries a lot of weight. Because cancer didn't just change my health, it changed the trajectory of my entire life. Cancer entered my life at a time when I was supposed to be worrying about college, friendships, late nights, future plans, figuring out who I was going to become. Instead, I was forced to confront mortality before I had even fully lived, before I had experienced adulthood, before I had built a life I thought I was guaranteed. And that kind of interruption leaves a mark. I created Combating Cancer because I wanted a space that felt real, not inspirational just for the sake of it, not polished or overly optimistic, but real. A space where people could show up exactly as they are. Messy, scared, grieving, hopeful, angry, confused. Honestly, everything I just listed applies to me too. And I hope that someone listening hears themselves in that and feels a little less alone. This space is for those in active treatment, in remission, caregivers, loved ones, anyone whose life has been permanently altered by cancer because cancer is isolating, it's overwhelming, and far too often it makes people feel like they're carrying something no one else can understand. And before we go any further, I want to pause and name who this episode is really for. If you're listening and you've ever felt disconnected from the person you used to be, if you look back at your life and you felt grief instead of nostalgia, if cancer, your own diagnosis or someone else's, changed the way you see your future or the world around you, this episode is for you. In one of my recent solo episodes, I shared that in 2026, I really wanted to lean into harder conversations. Conversations that don't fit neatly into Instagram captions or short clips. Conversations that don't always make people feel good, but make them feel seen. Conversations that are uncomfortable, unresolved, and ongoing. Because the truth is, not everything heals neatly. Not everything wraps up with a lesson or a silver lining. And I know what you might be thinking, Gwen, you already share so much. You're already an open book, and sometimes that's true, but I only really let you guys read the pages that I want you to. You know, there's a big difference between sharing what you've already processed and carrying things you haven't fully faced yet. And there are parts of this journey, parts of myself that I've kept quiet, even from me. One of those parts is the emotional and mental weight of grieving while still being alive, grieving the loss of who you were before cancer, grieving the life you thought you were going to have, grieving the version of yourself that didn't know fear like this. And I want to be very clear, this kind of grief isn't exclusive to patients. It applies to caregivers, partners, siblings, parents, friends. It applies to anyone whose sense of normal was shattered by a diagnosis. There's a very specific kind of grief that comes with surviving because you're still here, but everything is so different. And that kind of grief is confusing because society doesn't really give us language for it. People see you standing, breathing, functioning, and they assume you're okay. They tell you how strong you are, how inspiring you are, how grateful you must be. And while gratitude can absolutely exist, and I'm grateful every single day, so can grief. Those two things are not opposites. They coexist. We don't talk enough about what it feels like to mourn a life that technically still exists, but not in a way it once did. We don't talk enough about the loss of safety, the loss of certainty, the loss of innocence that comes when mortality is no longer an abstract idea, but something you've stared directly in the face. I think so many of us secretly wish for a reset button, a way to go back to the version of life before cancer entered the picture, before appointments, scans, and fear became part of our everyday vocabulary. And lately, I've realized that I've never really allowed myself to sit with how scared I truly was. I had a moment recently while I was talking with my boyfriend, Jake. We were having a conversation, completely normal conversation. And I said, almost without thinking, I'm 23, almost 24, and I feel old. And he looked at me and he was like, "What are you talking about? You're not old at all." And without even looking up, I casually responded because I thought I was going to die when I was 19. And those words came out so easily, too easily. And when I looked up and I saw the look on his face, it hit me. I mean, who says something like that so casually? I know I have dark humor, but like, who normalizes something that traumatic? I thought I was going to die at 19 years old. And I don't think I ever truly allowed myself to grieve that reality. I survived, but survival came at a cost. I've talked openly about how cancer shaped me, how it gave me perspective, purpose, compassion, and drive. And all of that is so true. I genuinely am so thankful for my life. I am incredibly grateful. Cancer stripped away so many things I used to take for granted, like being able to wake up, go to the gym, brush my tangled hair, and be thankful that I still had hair. It taught me to appreciate the ordinary in ways I never had before. And I love the work I get to do. I love this community. Every single person I've met through this platform just gets it. Even though cancer looks different for everyone, the emotions, the fear, the grief, the resilience are shared. But if I'm being completely honest, and I've tussled with this a lot, and I feel like every single day I have a different answer depending on what my mood is, on whether I would choose this path again, today I would say no. I would not choose cancer again. I would not choose the fear. I would not choose the trauma that shows up quietly years later in moments you don't expect. And, that doesn't make me ungrateful. It makes me human. And this is just the type of tension that I live with every single day, holding gratitude and grief at the same time, loving who I am now while missing who I was, missing the innocence of believing this won't happen to me. We're not the family that gets cancer. Like, Gwen Kelly does not get cancer. I miss not knowing. I miss the ignorance. I wish I didn't know how many people have brain tumors. I wish I didn't know how fragile life really is. I wish I didn't know how broken the system can be. And I wish I didn't know how many terrible cancers don't have any funding for research. But knowing also means I can advocate. Knowing means I can sit with others in pain. Knowing means I can create spaces like this. And you can feel all this at once, and you don't have to justify it to anyone. I can change my answer any single time I want to. But one thing that I've learned through this journey is that there is no right way to process cancer. There's no timeline. There's no checklist. I've met people who say they never think about it anymore. They're just grateful for today. And I've met people who say the fear never really leaves. And I've met people who felt like the only way they could survive was to move to a different state, start over, and become someone new. And here's the thing, none of those responses are wrong, because the truth is, the moment you hear the words, "you have cancer," your world stops. It doesn't matter what comes next. In that moment, the thought that cuts through everything is simple and terrifying. I might die. That fear doesn't care how old you are. 19, 78, it hits the same. And that's why I wanted to share this episode, not because I have answers, I clearly don't, and not because I've resolved this, I haven't, but because this is real and that this is where I am right now. And if I'm feeling this way, I know I'm not alone. I don't want this podcast to sound like everything is figured out. Sometimes honesty sounds like rambling. Sometimes healing sounds unfinished. Sometimes progress looks like simply naming something for the first time. And that's really the heart of today's message. Surviving cancer, or surviving the cancer of someone you love, changes you. It comes with grief you may have never expected, and it's okay to feel it. You don't have to have it all figured out. You are allowed to mourn, to fear, to reflect, and to move forward at your own pace. You are not alone. So before we wrap up today, I just want to leave you with a few thoughts, not advice, not solutions, just some things to think about. Take a moment and let yourself sit with everything that I've been rambling about today. The fear, the grief, the gratitude, relief, the longing, It's okay if it feels messy or complicated. That's normal. Think back for a second. Who were you before cancer touched your life? What parts of that person do you miss? And who are you becoming now? If some of that grief feels new, or like you weren't allowed to feel it before, know this. You are not alone. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not here to rush anyone through it. I'm just sharing my own story and hoping it reminds you that it's okay to feel what you feel. There's no perfect timeline, no right way to do this. Just showing up and noticing where you are, that's enough. That's valid. So thank you so much for listening and being part of this community. If this episode resonated with you, or if you think someone else might need to hear it, feel free to share it. And as always, if you or someone you know want to share their story or have a business inquiry, my door is always open. Until then, just take it one day at a time and one breath at a time. And I will chat with you all next Wednesday.